The voicemail was only 8 seconds long. No words, no crying, no plea for help, just the sound of someone breathing, slowly, unevenly, while a television played softly somewhere in the background. And then, right before the message ended, there was a sharp metallic noise, like a chain being dragged across the floor, followed by a whisper so quiet investigators had to amplify it 3 separate times to hear it clearly. "Don't let him find me." The message came from Natasha Darcy's phone, but according to everyone who knew her, Natasha had already been dead for 3 days. Natasha Darcy had the kind of face people trusted immediately. Warm smile, soft eyes, the type of laugh that made strangers feel included, even when they barely knew her. She worked at a rehabilitation center just outside a quiet coastal town, helping recovering addicts transition back into normal life. Her co-workers described her as patient to the point of exhaustion, the kind of person who stayed late to talk someone through a panic attack even if it meant missing dinner herself. She lived alone in a narrow blue townhouse at the edge of a wooded neighborhood, and aside from a failed engagement years earlier, her life appeared painfully ordinary. No enemies, no dangerous secrets, nothing dramatic. Which is exactly why the case disturbed people so deeply, because when someone like Natasha disappears, everyone wants there to be a reason. And when there isn't one, the mind starts creating monsters on its own. The first strange thing happened at work. Natasha missed an entire shift without calling anyone. That alone felt wrong. She was obsessive about responsibility. She once showed up with a fever because she didn't want to make the schedule difficult for anyone. Her supervisor called several times, no answer. Texts went unread. By evening, concern turned into fear when Natasha's younger sister, Elise, drove to the townhouse and noticed Natasha's car parked crooked in the driveway. One of the headlights still cracked from an accident weeks earlier. Inside, the television was on. Her purse sat near the kitchen counter. A cup of tea had gone cold beside the couch, but Natasha herself was nowhere. No signs of forced entry. No blood. No overturned furniture. Just one deeply unsettling detail Elise would later repeat to police over and over again. The front door had been unlocked, and Natasha never left it unlocked. Detectives initially treated the case as a missing persons investigation, but the atmosphere inside the townhouse bothered everyone who walked through it. It didn't look abandoned, it looked interrupted. A blanket was draped over the couch as if someone had just stood up moments earlier. Her reading glasses rested open atop a novel she had been halfway through. In the bathroom, steam stains still fogged the mirror edges from a recent shower. But the detail investigators kept returning to was the dining room chair. One chair had been pulled slightly away from the table at an awkward angle, facing toward the hallway instead of inward, like the others. Tiny scratch marks scarred the hardwood beneath it, as if it had been dragged quickly, violently. The kind of detail that doesn't mean much until later, when it suddenly means everything. Friends described Natasha as increasingly anxious during the weeks before she vanished. She had complained about someone following her home after work, though she never filed a report. At first, people assumed stress or paranoia. The rehabilitation center occasionally dealt with unstable patients, and Natasha had received threats before from families angry over relapses or treatment decisions. But then, Elise revealed something she hadn't told investigators immediately. Natasha had recently started dating again. Quietly, secretively, she refused to say much about the man except that his name was Adrian and that he understood broken people. Elise found that phrase unsettling because Natasha had smiled when she said it, but not naturally. More like someone trying to convince herself of something she didn't fully believe. Police tracked down Adrian Mercer within 2 days. He was calm, cooperative, almost unnervingly composed, tall, soft-spoken, meticulously dressed. The kind of man who maintained eye contact just a second too long. He explained that he and Natasha had been seeing each other casually for several months after meeting through a volunteer program connected to the rehabilitation center. He claimed the relationship was healthy, though distant. According to Adrian, Natasha struggled with trust and often disappeared emotionally for days at a time. He painted her as fragile, unstable, grieving old traumas. And because he spoke gently, because he sounded concerned rather than defensive, detectives initially believed him. But something about the interview sat wrong with one investigator, in particular Detective Lena Holt. She later admitted it wasn't anything Adrian said. It was the pauses between his answers. Like he was constantly measuring how human he needed to sound. Then came the discovery that shifted the case entirely. A maintenance worker clearing trash near the marina found Natasha's phone sealed inside a plastic grocery bag beneath a dumpster. The screen was cracked, water damaged, nearly unusable. Forensics recovered fragments of deleted messages, most of them ordinary conversations. But one draft message stopped investigators cold. It had never been sent. It contained only 6 words. He knows about the basement room now. No basement existed in Natasha's townhouse. Detectives checked immediately. Nothing beneath the house except a shallow crawl space. No hidden rooms, no underground storage, nothing. Yet the message changed the emotional gravity of the case overnight. Because now there was fear in Natasha's final hours. Specific fear. Directed fear. Fear of something hidden. The deeper investigators looked into Adrian Mercer, the stranger his history became. He had moved between states repeatedly over the last decade, rarely staying anywhere longer than 2 years. Previous relationships ended quietly, without police reports or public incidents, but there was an eerie consistency to the stories. Women described him as intensely attentive in the beginning, protective, almost romantic in an old-fashioned way, then gradually isolating, possessive. One former girlfriend admitted Adrian used to sit awake beside her while she slept because he liked watching her breathe. Another recalled waking up to find him standing in the doorway holding her phone. None of it was criminal, just deeply wrong, in ways difficult to explain without sounding paranoid. Meanwhile, Natasha's neighbors began sharing details that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. One woman remembered seeing Adrian outside Natasha's house late at night, several times even when Natasha wasn't home. Another claimed she heard arguing through the walls days before the disappearance, though she couldn't make out words clearly enough to understand the fights. But the most chilling statement came from a teenage boy across the street who often stayed up gaming late into the night. He told detectives he saw Natasha standing at her upstairs window 2 evenings before she vanished. She wasn't moving. She wasn't waving. She was just standing there in darkness, staring down toward the street. Then, according to him, a man stepped into view behind her and slowly closed the curtains. Search teams eventually expanded beyond the neighborhood woods and shoreline. Volunteers combed through marshlands while divers searched beneath the marina docks. Days turned into weeks. News coverage intensified. Natasha's face spread across television screens and social media feeds, always paired with the same smiling photograph that now felt almost cruelly innocent. Then investigators discovered surveillance footage from a gas station several miles outside town. The timestamp placed it after Natasha was believed to have disappeared. In the grainy footage, a woman matching Natasha's height and build walked beside Adrian Mercer toward a dark SUV. Her movements looked sluggish, unsteady. She wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and right before entering the vehicle, she turned briefly toward the camera. That single blurry frame haunted detectives because, even through distortion, there was something horrifying in her expression. Not panic, not confusion, emptiness. Like someone already emotionally gone, Adrian insisted. Natasha had asked him to help her leave town voluntarily because she needed space from her life. He claimed she was emotionally overwhelmed and wanted to disappear temporarily. But the story collapsed when forensic analysts enhanced the footage further. Natasha's right hand appeared partially visible near her side. Her wrist showed dark, bruising, circular bruising, consistent with restraints. Suddenly, the case transformed from missing persons to suspected abduction. Police obtained warrants, searched Adrian's property, tore apart his vehicles, dug through acres of land surrounding his isolated rental home. Yet somehow, they found nothing. No blood, no clothing, no evidence Natasha had ever been there. And still, Detective Holt couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian wasn't worried because he knew they were looking in the wrong place. The voicemail arrived during the fourth week of the investigation. Natasha's sister received it just after dawn, though metadata later showed the recording itself had been created days earlier. Elise listened once before collapsing onto her kitchen floor in tears. Investigators analyzed every second obsessively. The television audio in the background became a breakthrough. A forensic sound specialist isolated fragments of dialogue from an old black and white movie airing on a niche classic film channel. That channel had only been available through one local cable provider servicing a limited rural area outside town. Detectives narrowed the region quickly. Adrian's rental property fell directly inside the coverage zone. When police returned with a larger search team, Adrian appeared irritated rather than frightened. He watched silently as officers moved through the house. Detective Holt noticed strange details immediately. The air smelled heavily of bleach despite no visible cleaning supplies nearby. A hallway rug looked newer than the surrounding furniture, and one bedroom remained locked. Adrian claimed the room belonged to the homeowner and contained storage items unrelated to him. Officers forced the door open expecting evidence. Instead, they found a completely empty room. Bare walls, bare floor, nothing except an old television, sitting unplugged in the corner. The same model investigators identified from the voicemail audio. For a moment, nobody spoke, because suddenly the room felt less empty and more erased. Crime scene technicians pulled fibers from beneath the rug lining the hallway outside the empty room. Traces of blood emerged during testing, though heavily degraded from chemical exposure. The blood belonged to Natasha. Investigators also discovered tiny grooves along the baseboards, almost invisible unless viewed under angled light. Marks consistent with furniture repeatedly being moved in and out of position. Detective Holt became convinced something larger had once occupied the locked room, something deliberately removed shortly before the second search warrant was executed. But there was still no body, no definitive proof of murder, and without that, prosecutors feared Adrian could walk free. Then, another woman came forward after seeing news coverage. Her name was Clara Vance, and years earlier she had dated Adrian briefly in another state. She arrived visibly shaken, clutching old photographs with trembling hands. Clara described how Adrian became obsessed with preserving moments. He photographed everything, constantly, sleeping faces, conversations, injuries, tears. But one night, she claimed she discovered a hidden room inside his previous home containing shelves of videotapes labeled only with women's names, including hers. Clara fled before learning what was on them. Detectives asked why she never reported him. Her answer silenced the room. "Because he never hit me," she whispered. "He just made me feel like I was slowly disappearing." Investigators finally uncovered the truth, accidentally, through financial records. Weeks before Natasha vanished, Adrian purchased industrial soundproofing materials, using cash through a contractor linked to abandoned commercial properties near the marina. Detectives traced the purchase to a decaying warehouse scheduled for demolition. The building sat isolated near rusted shipping containers and flood-damaged factories no one used anymore. Inside, the warehouse looked empty at first glance. Dust-rotting beams, water stains, but one section of flooring sounded hollow beneath investigators' boots. Hidden under stacked plywood sheets was a concealed trapdoor leading underground. The basement below was impossibly cold, not unfinished cold, intentional cold. The walls were lined with insulation foam and heavy plastic sheeting. A mattress rested in one corner beside restraints bolted directly into concrete. Nearby sat shelves filled with cassette tapes, disposable cameras, and neatly labeled journals. Natasha's name appeared repeatedly across multiple entries. Detectives described the room as emotionally suffocating, like stepping inside someone's private nightmare. But the worst discovery wasn't the restraints or recordings, it was the realization that the room showed signs of recent occupancy. Half-finished water bottles, fresh footprints, a blanket still warm. Someone had been there very recently, and they were suddenly gone. Adrian disappeared the same night the warehouse was found. Authorities launched a massive manhunt while investigators combed through the journals recovered underground. The entries revealed a horrifying pattern stretching back years. Adrian targeted emotionally vulnerable women, inserting himself into their lives slowly until he became essential to them. Then he isolated them psychologically, documenting their fears, habits, breakdowns, even recording conversations without consent. But Natasha's entries were different. She resisted him constantly. She questioned inconsistencies in his stories. She challenged him, and eventually, she discovered the warehouse. According to Adrian's writings, Natasha threatened to expose everything after secretly following him there one evening. Then came the twist nobody expected. Forensic analysis revealed the voicemail wasn't recorded by Natasha at all. The breathing patterns, speech frequencies, even the whisper itself had been manipulated using fragments of old voice recordings Adrian secretly collected over months. He manufactured the voicemail after her death, not to taunt police, but to buy himself time, because Natasha had never survived long enough to send a message. Investigators believed she died the very night she disappeared inside the warehouse basement after attempting escape. The gas station footage everyone obsessed over, enhanced imaging later revealed the woman beside Adrian wasn't Natasha at all. It was another victim wearing Natasha's coat. The final victim was found alive 3 states away inside a remote cabin. Adrian had rented under a false name, weak, malnourished, barely able to speak. She confirmed everything investigators feared. Adrian treated people like emotional experiments. He studied terror the way scientists study behavior, documenting reactions with obsessive precision. According to her, Natasha fought him constantly after discovering the basement. She tried manipulating him psychologically, pretending affection to gain opportunities to escape. At one point, she nearly succeeded, but Adrian caught her before she reached the warehouse stairs. The survivor recalled hearing them scream at each other for hours afterward. Then silence, complete silence. Natasha's remains were eventually recovered from beneath the warehouse foundation. During demolition weeks later, Adrian himself was never captured. Authorities believed he fled across the border using false identification long before police connected the warehouse to him. Years passed. Sightings emerged occasionally, always unconfirmed. But what continued haunting investigators most wasn't the violence, it was the recordings. Hours and hours of women talking softly, crying, laughing nervously, asking questions into darkness while Adrian remained almost completely silent behind the camera, as if his entire existence depended on watching other people slowly lose themselves. And somewhere, buried inside evidence archives sealed away from public view, there is still an 8-second voicemail filled with breathing, static, and a whisper from a dead woman who never actually spoke at all.